Hello, my fellow Hulk fans. It's Jerry Rasco with you again today, and we are going to spend some time looking at Tales to Astonish number 67, specifically the part of the book featuring the Incredible Hulk. So if you're not familiar with this series that I do here, I am looking at every issue of the Incredible Hulk, starting at the very beginning with Hulk number 1, going through into modern Hulk issues. If you're not familiar with the history of the Hulk, after issue number 6, the Hulk standalone series was canceled, and the Hulk was moved to a 2-part book called Tales to Astonish, where he shared billing with Giant Man and the Wasp. So the first part of the book would be Giant Man and the Wasp, and then the back end would be the Hulk. The reason that they do this, again, if you're new, I've talked about this before, but it's a way to keep a character alive that maybe the sales weren't supporting a title of their own. It was also a place where you could have new artists kind of do a tryout. Basically, you could give them this script. It's only half of a book, and you could kind of see how that artist would work out, or how they would pair with an inker or finisher. So it's kind of what happened here in terms of this book and why the Hulk is in Tales to Astonish instead of his own book at this time. So we're going through and looking at all of those. And again, this is Tales to Astonish number 67. For those of you that are fans and have been following the series, thank you so much for doing so. I greatly appreciate it. We're continuing to grow. The views have been terrific, continue to increase all the time, which I greatly appreciate. And of course, I always want to remind everybody to subscribe. The subscribe button is free. You click that button. This will add us to your YouTube subscription, so you'll see new videos when they're out if you want to watch them. But I'm also pushing to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, which I can only do through you. So I need, if you're not a subscriber yet, please consider subscribing. It's 100% free. All you have to do is just click that button, and it puts you in the running to win some free art. So what we have here, here's the Incredible Hulk piece that I did that's going to be given away to one lucky subscriber. This obviously celebrates this series, but then we have other pieces as well. We have this Amazing Spider-Man piece celebrating the series that I do reviewing the Amazing Spider-Man comics. And lastly, right now, I also have this original X-Men team. This is them in their original school uniforms, celebrating the X-Men series that we just kicked off recently. And there are at least 3 more that are coming. I have the art done for 1. That'll be another giveaway. And there are going to be 2 more series coming out. So just by hitting that subscribe button, you will 100% be in the running to win free art. No purchase necessary. Shipping is paid for. All you have to do is be a lucky subscriber at that time. So please consider clicking that button. That said, we've got a lot to look at, so let's head over to the book and check it out together. So here is the cover to Tales to Astonish number 67. A good split right down the middle. Gives us 2 large vertical panels to work on for the figures and the overall design, which is really nice. Obviously here I'm focusing on the Hulk, though the whole thing is done by Jack Kirby. The whole cover is a Jack Kirby cover. We could get into this one and how they've dropped out all the color variation in the background to make it gray, to make the figures pop. That's a nice touch. But we're here to talk about the Hulk, so we're going to focus on this left side. It's a good cover. It's very simple. You also don't have a ton of room to work with. So we've got the Hulk leaping away from some airplanes, fighter jets that are trying to shoot him down. Nice stuff. It's a very simple pose, but done very well. It's a classic Jack Kirby with that great action, and the twist of the body is terrific. I do notice that Jack is one of the few people at this time that draws a hairy Hulk. So his arms are hairy, his chest is hairy. That's not something that we see through the other regular Hulk artists at this time. But overall, really nice. I like this edge shading here, this sort of feathering on this edge. It takes us and adds a light source so that the light is coming kind of behind him. And so this edge of his torso would be more in shadow, hence why it has a much thicker outline around the contour of that side than, say, for example, over here on this side of his pants, it's facing the light. So that's really nice touches, great inking work there. I don't know if Jack inked himself in this. I don't have those level of details in the credits. It just says Jack Kirby cover, so he might have inked this himself. I don't know. The one thing that I would note here that I had a problem with, and that is his hair. The problem with the hair is that it's not moving in relation to the body. He's leaping away from planes, which means he's moving at a high rate of speed. And when he has hair of this length that's kind of floppy, it should be blowing in the other direction opposite of his movement. It's a subtle thing, and does it take away from the overall cover? No. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't help sell the movement, that he's moving and moving fast. That's just an easy way to do it. So as you are, if you're an artist and you want to make comics and you are trying to figure out your character, one of the things that you can do which helps create a sense of movement on the page is have hair or costume elements or something that moves. For me personally, I love having, when you have a female character, I love to give them long hair as much as possible so that as they're moving, the hair is moving with them. And again, just helps emphasize that speed. You can do it with male characters. They can have long hair if you want as well, moving through. That's what capes do, right? Capes show movement, especially as characters are flying through the air. If you have sashes, ties, anything that can sort of stream, flutter, and move in the wind, these are all things that can help bring energy and movement to your images. So I highly recommend that. But otherwise, good cover. So let's go in here. We're going to skip this part because this is the Giant Man and the Wasp piece that I mentioned. We're not going to talk about that. I will note that the book was published in 1965. So just to take that into consideration. So what we are looking at here is a scanned PDF copy of this comic. In 2007, Marvel got a hold of all these issues, put them on a big flatbed scanner, and they were able to scan all the pages. So you see all the original ads, the page turns, the staples, any folded pages, tears, whatever. It's all exactly the way it was in 1965. So that's a nice kind of time capsule, if you will, that helps us see what things were like at the time. Real quick, let's talk about the art team. So we do have a slight change here. We have Stan Lee writing. We still have Steve Ditko doing the art. And now we have a new inker named Frank Ray. So Frank Ray is a pseudonym for Frank Giacoia. Frank Giacoia. So Frank Giacoia is a very well-known artist who started out back in the 50s. Started doing work on things like The Flash and Batman, but he's most well known for his work on Captain America with the Jack Kirby. So he's known more as a Jack Kirby inker than a Steve Ditko inker. I would argue that except for these Hulk issues, so far, most of the time we ever see Steve Ditko, he tends to be inking himself. But in this case, Frank Giacoia is inking this book. So, like I said, he's known for inking Cap over Jack Kirby. He inked the first appearance of the Punisher in Amazing Spider-Man. And he also worked on a lot of the Marvel newspaper strips. So for me, the local newspaper where I grew up did not carry Marvel strips in the Sunday comics or the daily comics section of the newspaper. So I really didn't know about Marvel comic strips for a long time, but they were a big part of the publishing division. They had a regular Amazing Spider-Man, as well as other characters weekly in newspapers around the country. So kind of a thing it's sort of a blind spot in my own comic book history knowledge, just because I wasn't exposed to it growing up, but something to note, and that Frank Giacoia worked on a lot of those. So maybe something we'll check out down the road. So real quick, we're going to talk about the splash page here. I always love jumping into the story on a big splash page. I think that's great. It sets everything up. It's a nice introduction to the story, which leaves us off right where we left, or starts us off right where we left off in the previous issue, which is terrific. The thing that I don't like here, I don't like seeing the back of the Hulk. And I've noticed in these last couple issues, that's one of the things we see a lot, is a lot of the back of the Hulk facing the audience or facing the reader. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with it. But you can lose a lot of opportunity for expression, for personality, for developing stuff about the character that's hard to do when you can't see their face. It's all body language and just the word balloons. The Hulk has a unique face, or should have a unique face, has a unique look. So for me, I feel like this is sort of a missed opportunity to maybe, instead of the Hulk kind of in the, I'll say foreground, he's not in the extreme foreground, but he's in the foreground, and then the tanks coming up through the middle ground in the background. What if it was the other way around, and you're looking through the tanks and you're seeing this great, big, menacing Hulk at the top of the hill screaming that he's stronger than the tanks? To me, that might have more impact. So I don't really like a lot of the, and we'll see it again, I'll point it out, where we see a lot of the back of the Hulk. I mean, for one reason, I guess you're seeing it's probably easier. You don't have to draw the face as much. And I do have some issues with how the Hulk's face is drawn throughout this issue. So that might be part of it. I don't know. The other thing I want to talk about is just anatomy. We don't talk about it a ton here because most of the artists that in all the series we do are very strong and have a excellent, if not, outstanding understanding of human anatomy as they draw these figures. One of the things that is often a blind spot, if you will, for a lot of artists when you're drawing these superhero characters is the back. The back is a weird thing. The front of a human being is very sort of segmented into large muscle groups that are easy to remember and easy to put in order. Plus, yes, even if we're all not as big and strong and buff as the Hulk, we all have musculature, and we can all kind of sit here and go, okay, I've got a chest muscles, and then from down below here, I've got sort of a rib cage, and then below that, I've got my abdomen, and we sort of understand how that all works. You can look at your own arm and go, okay, here's the muscles in the arm, I get it. Can't look at your own back. And now today, I'm going to show you a picture of kind of how the back muscles work. So here you go. You can see there's different groupings. There's a large sort of set, like big triangle of muscles that sit in between your shoulder blades that fit across the top of your back. There's muscles that go under those shoulder blades as well and all the way down. So there's lots of groups of sort of muscles that do that. And this is not a massive, Mr. Olympic kind of bodybuilder scale. This is, but still a good depiction of the muscles. So this is what it could look like. Now, again, I had Google. This is what we have the advantage of today. I can just type power lifter back muscles, and you get an image like this. Let's get back to the comic here, and you can see here's the Hulk, and he has his shoulder muscles and his arm muscles, and he has these big scapula, which are his shoulder blades, but there isn't much other muscle throughout his back. He's got his traps, which are these muscles in your shoulders between, so between your shoulder and your neck, you've got these muscles here. Those are big, but there's nothing below it where that big sort of triangle of muscle would be right in between. So again, if you're going to show the back of a character a lot, I'll make sure you've got that musculature down, especially for a character like the Hulk that is shirtless all the time. So, excuse me. That's something that's not uncommon. Like I said, back muscles are something I've heard other artists say are very tough, just because as you flex and move your body, sometimes they flex, some don't. It's not as simple as that front view. But I wanted to point that out because we haven't really talked a lot about anatomy in these series, to be perfectly honest. And then the last thing that just kind of bugs me, I just really for the first time noticed it, even though we've been reading these books for a while. Why does the Hulk have a belt? How does the Hulk have a belt? So I understand Banner could have had a belt. But if he's so big that the pants are tearing ridiculously at the knees, at the cuffs, because his calves are so big, and around the waist, how would a belt that fits Banner fit the Hulk too? It makes no sense. Why are you drawing a belt? Craziness. So anyway, small little detail, but sometimes those things are important, and it's important we don't forget them. On the next panel here, or next page, I like this tank. I like the perspective of the barrel coming right at us like that. It's good foreshortening there, and kind of emphasizes, hey, this is a big weapon. Like, this is a big gun, basically, that's pointing at the Hulk. This first panel, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Not great. And again, this is where we're talking about anatomy and how it works. So it just feels odd that the shoulders and arms are kind of connected in a weird way. Yes, as I bring my arm forward, my shoulder rotates forward, but it doesn't necessarily, unless I squeeze my arms in together, that shoulder doesn't get a ton closer to my head. It still stays to the side. So, and if I lift up my shoulders, then my collarbones are raised dramatically, right? Your collarbones flex like this. They go up and down. It's sort of like almost like a hinge, if you will. So it's straight out, and as you lift your shoulder up, it kind of veers in this direction. You see it a little bit here, but it should be much more dramatic and on the other side. I don't know. It just feels like the arms are connected at a very weird angle. And then I talked about this as well. There's no real bend to the torso. The very short waist, which would tell me maybe he's lunging forward at the waist, but the torso is drawn straight down instead of tapering backwards, and we don't see any foreshortening of that torso. Those ab muscles are all straight up and down, but he's trying to come forward. So that's kind of a disconnect there, and why that doesn't work as well. Again, I think I used this as an example last time as well. I'll show you again on my X-Men piece here. When you look at the Angel, he is coming at us and his arms are coming forward, but you can see how little we can see of underneath the rib cage, the abdomen to the waist. That is all foreshortened because he's going away from us. Now, it's much more dramatic than maybe what the Hulk pose is here, but you could do some of that where you would shorten up the space between the abdomen muscles, narrow down that waist, and kind of pitch it backwards, and then that way it would make sense like he's leaping at the tanks. So beyond that, the rest of this is pretty good. I like the fact that he rips the turret off the tank and starts using it as a weapon to smash into the other tanks. I think that's a really great idea and just shows the power of the Hulk. I think that's a really neat sequence there. And then I'm going to show you in a little bit, but we get to this piece here where the next page, they launch some rockets, which is fine. And then the Hulk rips up the road to kind of throw the tanks off balance. We've seen him do this before, so I don't have a problem with this trope. The Hulk lifting up the pavement and sort of shaking it the way you would a carpet or like a, what do you call it? A tablecloth, kind of something like that. That's terrific. My only problem is we haven't really established that this is a paved road, and to me, it doesn't read as such. We start out, he's in the mountains, he's surrounded by rocks. There's sort of this high mountain pass you can see here. It's colored in this yellow, which kind of works with the stone and the ground coloring. So there's nothing that really indicates to me that this is a clearly paved road through this remote mountain site. So I feel like this would be more of a dirt road. And why? So then he wouldn't be able to rip it up. We're going to forget about that for a minute and just talk about the art of how he did it. So we're going to pass on the kind of questionableness of this and really talk about the shading. The back here is pretty good. This is a little more flexed. There's still a few muscle groups kind of missing that I would like to see, but it's definitely better. I like the shading on the underarm of the under part of the forearms and the legs. I think is very nice. And then this shading, as he lifts up the road, shadow as he lifts it up over his head, shadows the body, the arms. I think that's really nice. It works out very, very well. So that's done very expertly. He then, while they're off balance, leaps forward and he's coming down. I like this panel here of him coming down on the tank, so we see that target, and then especially this panel, him smashing down and the tank going to pieces like that is great. Really shows the power of that impact. I think it's awesome. Again, ripping off the turret one more time, using it as a weapon, and then this framing of the Hulk in the foreground with his hands holding that tank barrel and getting ready to swing it into the other tank as the guys flee. Awesome. Really great sequence. And the whole thing very much reminds me of the 2003 Hulk movie, where this is exactly what happens. He battles some tanks and he uses the tanks as weapons against the other tanks by ripping, either grabbing them by the barrel, like one he swings around and throws, the other he rips the turret off, just like we saw here in the comic, and smashes it. So these are still images from that movie sequence, which for that whole movie, it's probably one of the best sequences in the whole thing. Really works well. And whether it was influenced from the comic, this is obviously Tales to Astonish 67 is not the first time the Hulk, or the last time the Hulk will tear up tanks. So the influence could have been from somewhere else, but it's always nice to see kind of where that stuff could come from. So possibly a comic like this could have influenced those images that we saw from the movie. But it's a really nice sequence of him, again, continuing to smash up the tanks in a really fun way. Now they surround him, and he uses his thunderclap kind of hand attack that we've seen, where the Hulk, swings his hands and there's a concussive force that knocks things down. My only problem with it is, well, there's several problems. One, the way that the clap is drawn. Usually you see his hands out wide and they come together in a big arc like this, directing that force, forcing that air and that shockwave in a direction, and really swinging into it with a big motion lines, big wide swing. That's great. This one, the hands are at opposite directions. One's down, one's up, which is kind of odd. It's an odd way to clap. It doesn't have the power, and we don't see the motion, and yet somehow this clap literally blows the tanks apart into pieces. Here's my suggestion. What I would have liked to have seen is the Hulk come in with a really big punch, maybe hit the ground as hard as he could, causes a shockwave that knocks the tanks up into the air, and then we see them on their sides, because a tank on its side is as disabled, if you will, as a tank that's knocked into pieces. People aren't going to get out and push these tanks over. They're not the Hulk. So that's a change I would have made. And then the other change I have is this other piece here. He's still facing us with his back to us. It's, again, we're missing on the facial expressions and things that we could do with the Hulk. So instead of guys running away and him standing there and we're looking from behind, just kind of watching passively, what if we had, again, in my scenario, the Hulk, the tanks have been knocked over off their treads on the sides. The guys are clambering out. That's in the foreground at us. They're running towards us. And in the background, we have this huge Hulk just flexing and screaming and yelling about how mad he is and how he's crushed them all. Feels more powerful to me than this image from behind, where we don't really see anything. He's just kind of standing there. The next page, there's some good stuff. There's some bad stuff. I do want to talk about this face, and we're talking about the hair. I mentioned the hair earlier. Like, watch the hair. I want to talk about how we draw hair in comics. And this I take from an interview I saw with a well-known comic creator named J. Scott Campbell. He's worked for Image, Marvel, DC. He's primarily one of the top cover artists in the business today. But he did interiors for Gen 13 and Danger Girl and many other books. So this is a guy who knows what he's talking about. So the way that he draws hair is he starts with an overall shape. Like you have your head, but then your hair sits on top and has a shape. Whether there's a style, a long style, a short style, whatever, it has a shape over the top. So you have a general outline of what that hair should be. Then you can go in and, depending on if it's a close-up or a long shot or whatever, you can either do chunks sort of hair together, or if it's real close, you can come in and start to draw individual hairs. It's the same kind of way that we deal with things like trees. When you draw trees from a distance, you're going to draw chunks, clumps of tree versus individual leaves. You get close, you're going to draw individual leaves. Well, what we're seeing here with the Hulk, there is no overall shape. It's just a bunch of lines. It doesn't... Now, I don't have a problem with shaggy hair Hulk. That's not a big deal. But it doesn't seem to have the overall flow that I'm looking for in terms of a shape. And then the other part is this coloring. If you're going to color the highlight the same shape as, or same tone as the skin, then what happens is when you have gaps in the hairs, because you're drawing sort of individual hair strands, you have gaps, it looks like a bald spot. So if it's a highlight and a shine, leave it white. Fill in all those black shapes, fill in the highlight white, do it as a darker green. His hair is so dark it's almost black. Make it a darker green. We could do that as well. Anything to separate it from skin to make it not look like this weird balding patch kind of, which is it just reads odd. And again, think about the overall shape that you're looking for. Lastly, about the face, it took me a while to figure out what's wrong with the face. Scowl lines are fine. I don't have a problem with the smile creases or anything like that around the nose. My problem is with the eyes. The eyes are very heavy lidded. His eyes aren't big and open and wide and aggressive like we're used to with the Hulk. His eyes are very heavy. And then you have these lines underneath, multiple bags under his eyes, and crow's nest. The crow's lines. These are things, yeah, crow's nest, right? Is that what it's called? Crow's feet. That's what they're called. Those indicate age. Typically age and fatigue. Now, the Hulk, yes, he fought, but he's supposed to be tireless and never going to run out of steam here. But unfortunately, he looks old and tired because of all those lines. You'd be better off just doing a dark shadow under the eyes. That part would be fine than all these multiple lines. It just doesn't read great. Then as we move down, the Hulk leaps away. I like the idea of him leaping away from the planes. That leads us to our image on the cover, which is great. However, this size Hulk is like way too big. So in terms of what we've got here, you've got this plane, and this plane is roughly, I would argue, in the same relative space. They're about the same height on the page. So I'm estimating they're kind of in similar distance from us, which means if the Hulk is in relationship size to the plane, this Hulk is about 15 to 20 feet tall, which doesn't make sense. Likewise, you can see he's bounded over these trees, and these trees are so large that all we see, like I mentioned, just like the hair, is just sort of clumps, canopy of leaves. And so we can see the Hulk individually. Even though the trees are so big, we can't see individual trees for the forest, which means he's as big as, or bigger than, multiple trees. That doesn't really work either. Now, the last thing I want to tell you about on this page before we move on is just sort of a negative thing that you want to try to avoid as an artist. So again, for newer young artists, you have this panel, and this panel. And the Hulk in all three panels is almost the exact same size and in almost the same pose. This pose and this pose are almost the same with just a slight turn. His legs are drawn up towards his body more, but this arm is kind of similar. This arm is back. This arm is back. If we just extended one leg, the poses would be nearly identical and the same size. And then this one, all you do here is extend this other leg a little bit, and these two are very similar. This one's slightly bigger, but not much. This is not the variety that we need. When you have your characters like this and they're moving in time, you need to vary your camera angles and the size of your figures to keep that interest. Otherwise, it just really becomes kind of dull. So for me, my thought is if I have the Hulk and the Hulk has leapt away and he's landing on the ground, what's the most exciting angle I could use? Looking up as he's coming down. I could still have rocks around me on the peripheral. We'll still see them, but you see that Hulk coming in for a landing. That's an upshot, and that would be a much more interesting angle for us to see. Then you could do a slightly close up. So now the Hulk is even larger in the frame. As he's bending down, he's got a hand maybe resting on a rock as he's lowering his body to sit down in these rocks as he's looking for a place to rest. Great. Then you don't have to change this first panel. That's what I would do. Now, those subtle changes, neither one is going to take you any longer to draw than what's here on the page. It's just a different angle that keeps the reader interested and keeps that excitement going. So for me personally, that's how I would do it. And I think that's important in terms of how we vary up the size and the camera angle that we're using in our panel-to-panel imagery. From here, what we've got is actually a nice profile shot of the Hulk. It seems like for whatever reason, people seem to be able to get the foreground or a profile right. Not sure exactly why, but we've got the big brow, the big eyebrow, the smaller pug nose, the long upper lip. I'd like the jaw to be a little deeper, so the neck could be a little thicker maybe, but this is good hair. You've got an overall outline, shape, form as it sits on the head. And then you have individual shading to show us where the light is from. That's a great way to do it. That absolutely works. So it's probably one of the better Hulk images in the entire book, to be perfectly honest. And then we see him transform as he falls asleep into Banner. This is the first time. So in the past, they've had to do gamma radiation to turn him into Banner or back into the Hulk. And then, and of course, when he saw the sun, he would transform into Banner. And then when the sun went down, he'd transform into the Hulk. That's how it all started. And then most recently, as Banner would get overly excited or anxious, or angry, he would turn into the Hulk. And then when the Hulk got over angry or over excited or anxious or whatever, he would turn back into Banner. So this is the first time we've seen that opposite, where it's the adrenaline turns him into the Hulk and the rest, relaxation, turns him back into Banner. But this is a really nice figure of Banner here. That's a great profile shot of the face. Very well drawn, very nice. And we've also got this idea that we have now truly separated these characters. I think I mentioned it earlier, but the Hulk does not know what Banner knows. He can barely remember Rick and what happened with Rick. So he doesn't even know. He doesn't even use Rick Jones. He's just, I remember Rick boy. And then when he wakes up, Banner has no idea where he is. He doesn't remember leaping away and what happened. So he's trying to figure out what's going on. Turns out he is in Mongolia, and he is captured by some Mongolians. And I did a quick little Google search because I wasn't sure. And it turns out Mongolia was a independent nation at the time of this comic in 1965. In fact, it appears they were an independent nation all the way up to like 1992 with their own president. They were essentially a republic. They were tied tightly with the Soviet Union in terms of, geopolitical interests and things of that nature. But Mongolia was its own country at the time. So to say he's in Mongolia makes absolute sense to the time that this takes place. So that's just kind of a neat history fact there. And they are going to ransom him it turns out, to the Americans, because they feel like the Americans will spend more. They're more free with their money than the communists, than the Russians. These two faces here are very Ditko-y faces. There's just the line work, the structure, the way he uses shading to emphasize the planes of the face. Very, very Ditko-esque faces here on the top of the page. This is another thing I was talking about where, again, important to vary your camera angle and your size, even with just two panels like this. We're behind General Ross. He's giving his orders to Major Talbot to go get Bruce Banner in Mongolia. Talbot's telling him, this guy's a traitor, and I'm going to prove it. Ross is like, I don't care, just get him. So Talbot's got his own motives for doing this. But the point here is that the figures are very similar in size. They're a little bit bigger on the right-hand page, but in terms of the pose, the angle to the desk, everything is the same. And so this would be an opportunity to change your angle on panel 2 and maybe be looking over General or Major Talbot's shoulder, and then you're seeing General Ross's face. Again, just varying things up to keep the reader interested. Having 2 panels back to back with very similar layout, composition, size of figure, angle of the camera, those are all things you want to try to avoid as much as possible. Unless you're showing something that's literally like, if you want to show me and then show me lifting up the paper and then show me putting the paper down, then I might keep that same angle because it's action, action, action. Here, these are just people talking. You want to make it as interesting as possible. Switch that angle up, make the imagery more vibrant. This is nice here with the framing of the rock. That's some really nice cross-hatching on the rock. It's a subtle thing, but I really like it. The texture feels like rock. It's one of the things that, again, this is Frank Giacoia as an inker, adding his element and making things feel like the material they are. So like this guy's hat really feels sort of woven, if you will, whereas the rock really has a nice, texture of a worn rock face, compared to other things like, again, the tanks maybe and stuff had a different texture to them. So that part is very good. There's a weird tangent here I want to point out that, again, something to be important and to watch out for as an artist. Tangent is where the outside contour lines of 2 separate objects at different depths of field, meaning different depths away from each other, line up perfectly, and it completely eliminates the illusion of depth. So the line of the hat ends right where Banner's forehead is, and his hair kind of, again, lines up with the hat, makes this weird triangle that it's very hard to break. So that's something to watch out for. Easy fix, you either make them slightly closer together or further apart so that there's nothing touching. If you move the figures apart 1/4 of an inch, then you don't have any problem with that tangent. So just something to watch out for there. They're attacked by another local group of these raiders. And so Talbot and Banner flee. And again, here's another tangent that I want to talk about very quickly. So Talbot leaps over this rock to fight so they can try to escape. This is supposed to be his knee, this little yellow circle here. I'm very confident about that. But that means that this is the front of his shin, which again makes sense in terms of the size. We were using the other shin as a reference point. That would make sense. That's his lower leg. But this is also the rock face. So what is it? Is he kneeling on the rock and leaping across it? Is this his shin and it's supposed to be in front of the rock and only his foot is behind? I don't understand exactly what's happening here. I would have just lowered this leg down at a slightly different angle and had it overlap this little rock outcropping. And then that way there's no question about it. And just put him in front of the rock face and Banner slightly behind it, which makes more sense. Then they pull back here and Banner tells him, hey, I warned you not to step out too fast. And because they're getting shot at. When? This is one of the things I do not like. Again, pacing wise, these things are all happening very fast. You've got to go. We rush out away from the tent in the village. We're trying to escape on these rocks. We move forward. We get shot at. We pull back. When did Banner warn him? Either do it or don't, but don't reference things that sort of happen off panel when there's no time in between panels for it to happen. This is all happening almost, essentially real time, fast, quick, minute to minute. So that's a little weird. They then fall, and this is awkward, right? It's like very cartoony, very Wile E. Coyote, where it's like they've fallen and they haven't realized that they've fallen yet. So I think I would have had the the ledge start to crumble as opposed to it being in free fall and them still somehow standing on it and talking. If you want to have them talking a bunch, have it start to break and then the shaking, and then in this next panel it's broken apart and they're falling. We get it. You don't need this sort of in between, again, Wile E. Coyote, Acme cartoon, Warner Brother cartoon, falling before they fall. So that's a little weird. But how are they going to get out of this? Well, here we got a real quick notice at the end I want to point out. It looks like this is the end of the run for Steve Ditko on this book. So it looks like we're heading back to Jack Kirby. So we started Jack Kirby with Hulk #1, and now we're coming back to Jack doing the work here. And it looks like Steve Ditko is going to be continuing to move on. At this point, he's still doing Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and we'll see what else comes from there. But that is the end of the book. So that all said, let's cut back over to the desk and we'll wrap things up very quickly. So that is Tales to Astonish #67. Not terrible. So the Hulk had his little venture out into the world, and we saw how the world reacted to the Hulk. I would have liked to have seen it last longer. Maybe it will. Maybe him and Talbot will be on the run for a while before they can get back to the U.S. That would be interesting to see. Kind of a weird buddy cop. How do they get through things without Talbot figuring out that Banner's the Hulk? That'll be interesting to see. And again, the pairing of Frank Giacoia with Steve Ditko, not bad. There's some upsides, some downsides. There's things they did very well. There's some things I didn't like as much. I'm always going to prefer Steve Ditko inking himself, but that's just me. So overall, from a rating, I would give this book a 6 out of 10. Primarily, that rating comes from the tank battle. I like how the Hulk trashed the tanks. I like him ripping them apart and using them as weapons against themselves. I think that's really cool. So to me, that kind of carried the book and why I would give it a 6 out of 10. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that. It's fun. We're going to now look as we continue this story to see what happens with Major Talbot and Bruce Banner on the run in the wilds of Mongolia, with Jack Kirby at the helm penciling the book. So it'll be a fun look next week with Tales to Astonish #68. Thank you for being here, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you next week. Same place, same time, with even more incredible Hulk. Thanks.